Greetings from Winnipeg, Canada. My name is Salki, and I represent the Lake Winnipeg Foundation, a member of the Living Lakes Network and a non-government, non-profit organization with a vision to protect, preserve, and restore Lake Winnipeg in Canada. The Lake Winnipeg Foundation was established in 2005 by a group of citizens concerned with the failing health of the lake. The foundation has a voluntary board of directors and a science advisory council, of which I am chair, and we have 4 staff members. During my career, I was a research biologist with Fisheries and Oceans Canada at the Freshwater Institute in Winnipeg. I conducted whole ecosystem research at the experimental lakes area and on several hundreds of lakes throughout Canada. It is a pleasure to participate in the Life Albufera webinar and speak about participatory models in Canada that exemplify community actions for the recuperation of degraded lakes and wetlands. Today, I will focus on why we need to act on wetland restoration, provide examples of Canadian agencies working to protect wetlands, outline some wetland studies and initiatives in our local region, and conclude with a Lake Winnipeg Foundation restoration project currently underway on Netley-Lebo Marsh. Wetlands occur on all continents and cover between 5 to 10% of the Earth's land area. Wetlands are particularly common in north temperate latitudes of North America and Eurasia, and in the tropical regions of India, Malaysia, and China. Canada is endowed with approximately 1.5 million square kilometers of wetlands, covering 16% of Canada's land area and accounting for 25% of the world's remaining wetlands. 37 of Canada's wetlands, covering almost 131,000 square kilometers in area, have been designated as wetlands of international importance. Some trends in wetland distribution and abundance. Wetlands are being lost and degraded more quickly than any other ecosystem type. More than half of the world's original wetlands have disappeared. The number and area of wetlands is expected to decline with climate change and increasing land use, resulting in losses to waterfall production and other wetland biodiversity functions. In this figure, the Wetlands Extent Index, prepared by the Convention of Biological Diversity, shows how wetland areas throughout the world have shrunk on average about 40% since 1970. In Europe and Asia, more than 50% of wetland areas have been lost. A similar analysis by the World Wildlife Fund, their Global Living Planet Index of wildlife population trends, shows a decline of around 30% from 1970 to 2007 in nearly 8,000 populations of 2,500 species of birds, mammals, amphibians, reptiles, and fish. All of the declines are associated mainly with habitat loss and human intervention. Now, some models of wetland restoration activities by Canadian not-for-profit organizations. The first is Nature Conservancy of Canada. Who are they? What do they do? They are Canada's leading private non-profit land conservation organization that partners with individuals, corporations, other non-profit organizations, and all governments to protect important natural areas that sustain Canada's plants and wildlife. NCC secures properties through donation, purchase, conservation agreement, and manages them for the long term. After 40 years, Total area conserved is nearly 966,000 acres, providing habitat for 173 species at risk. NCC marked 2015 World Wetlands Day in Manitoba by celebrating their protection of over 7,000 acres of wetlands across our province. Here is a map of Canada showing the sites where land has been conserved under the Natural Areas Conservation Program of the NCC. NCC is also actively involved in the North American Waterfowl Management Plan, an international collaboration between Canada, the US, and Mexico to protect wetland and upland habitat for migratory birds and waterfowl. A second agency especially focused on wetland restoration is Ducks Unlimited Canada, a registered charity that partners with government, industry, nonprofit organizations, and landowners to conserve wetlands that are critical to North America's waterfowl and also beneficial to other wildlife and people. DUC has completed 9,557 habitat projects and conserved 6.4 million acres of wetlands and associated habitat. DUC's Scientific Institute for Wetland and Waterfowl Research finds answers to important environmental questions and establishes the value of wetlands. Canada loses an average of approximately 80 acres of wetlands every 24 hours. Ducks Unlimited also contributes to the Canadian Wetland Inventory, which was established in 2002 to help answer questions such as, where are Canada's remaining wetlands? How much area do they cover? What types of wetlands are they? And are they being threatened? DUC also offers online an interactive wetland map showing the status of the Canadian Wetland Inventory in particular regions of Canada. A good example of DUC's efforts to better understand the impacts of wetland drainage and loss on our freshwater ecosystems is the Broughton Creek Project. Study findings showed significant impacts resulting from wetland drainage, such as a 37% increase in peak flow following rainfall events, a 62% increase in water flow, a 32% increase in phosphorus loading from the watershed, a 57% increase in nitrogen loading from the watershed, an 85% increase in sediment loading on an annual average, a 28% decrease in waterfall production. A third example of an agency focused on protecting lakes, wetlands, and water resources across Canada is Living Lakes Canada, a relatively new agency founded in 2012 by WildSight in British Columbia, the Lake Winnipeg Foundation, and the Global Nature Fund. Its 10 members across the country represent Canada's 4 major river sheds. Living Lakes Canada transfers science to the public and fosters stewardship actions by raising awareness, educating and engaging citizens, and proposing innovative policy changes to assist Canada's 4 levels of government that manage our lakes and their watersheds. Living Lakes Canada leadership at the national scale has been recognized by the federal government as a best practices example of community-based ecological monitoring. The Lake Winnipeg Foundation is a member of Living Lakes Canada, as well as a co-founder, with a focus on Lake Winnipeg and its very large watershed of 1 million square kilometers. Much of the watershed consists of rich prairie soils used to produce grains for export to the world. The use of inorganic fertilizers and the drainage of wetlands in the basin are the main causes of the eutrophication of Lake Winnipeg, designated as GNF's Threatened Lake of 2012. To restore the health of Lake Winnipeg, the Lake Winnipeg Foundation Health Plan calls for improving shoreline management. Effective management requires good data. In 2011, the Lake Winnipeg Foundation collected physical, chemical, and biological data to document the Lake Winnipeg South Basin shoreline features. This figure shows the 300-kilometer-long survey route along the shoreline and the field sampling crew and their boat. This map shows how the Lake Winnipeg shoreline was subdivided into 50 segments based on the types of dominant shoreline substrate, land use, modification, and level of impact. Each segment was rated using ecosystem criteria and assigned a sensitivity index intended to guide management decisions. Netley-Lebo Marsh was part of the survey, and it's shown at the bottom of the map. Wetland restoration is also a priority of the Lake Winnipeg Foundation, and in 2014 it began a project on Netley-Lebo Marsh, a large 10,000-hectare ecosystem which has deteriorated substantially over the past several decades. To the right you can see the Red River, which flows into the marsh from the south and carries about 6,000 tons of phosphorus into Lake Winnipeg annually. Manitoba's 3 large lakes have many wetland areas as shown in green around their periphery, considerably more than the coastal wetlands found in the Laurentian Great Lakes, as seen in the figure to the right. Netley-Lebo Marsh is particularly important and valuable for several reasons. It's a major breeding and staging area for waterfowl in North America. It collects and holds floodwaters in the spring. It filters toxins, sediments, and nutrients, provides culturally important medicines and food, stores carbon, it's a source of biomass, it protects endangered species, and importantly, it's a nursery for forage species that support the commercial fishery in Lake Winnipeg, which is the largest walleye fishery in North America. This is what a functioning marsh should look like. Dense stands of emergent vegetation interspersed by small water areas. In its degraded state, Netley-Lebo Marsh now looks like this. Relatively sparse cattail and large open areas of water. The flyways of many important bird species, including geese and ducks, pass through Netley-Lebo Marsh. Recent trends in Canada's bird populations are depicted in this figure. Of the 9 groups of birds, 6 have declined during the 1970 to 2010 period. The general increase in waterfowl observed in other parts of Canada are in contrast to the declines observed in the Netley-Lebo Marsh area. Observations of Canada geese and snow geese at Netley-Lebo have fallen dramatically from more than 100,000 in the past to below 2,000 birds in 2012. Numbers of other globally significant bird species, such as Forster's tern, have also fallen significantly at Netley-Lebo Marsh. Healthy marshes offer not only wildlife habitat, but also other ecosystem services, such as nutrient sequestration and biomass production. Research conducted in Netley-Lebo Marsh by the International Institute for Sustainable Development in Winnipeg and the University of Manitoba reveals that harvesting cattail biomass can remove 20 to 60 kilograms of phosphorus from litter and sediment per hectare per year. A further benefit can be gained from using harvested cattail biomass for bioenergy feedstock to displace fossil fuels used for heating or electricity. As well, the potential for harvesting phosphorus from the biofuel ash is being explored for use in fertilizers. The harvest of cattails could diversify rural economic activity while also providing increased energy security and access to phosphorus. A final participatory model is the recent Lake Winnipeg Foundation project undertaken to restore Netley-Lebo Marsh. Phase 1 of the project was a workshop that brought scientists, academia, government, and other stakeholders together to exchange available data and views on potential solutions for this major challenge. The next few figures show the progressive change in the marsh from the 1920s to the present. In 1923, most of the marsh was covered with emergent typhus species and bulrush, with open water mainly as small lakes. This map shows the series of small lakes that still existed in 1934. By 1979, many of the smaller lakes had coalesced, and bulrushes were less common, and by 2001, most of the marsh was open water. Two aerial views of the Red River and Netley Marsh. The upper showing the initial changes to Netley Marsh in 1923, 10 years after a cut was made in 1913 in the west bank of the Red River. The lower photo shows major changes to Netley Marsh that occurred by 2009 and continue to the present. Some satellite observations are providing additional glimpses of changes to Netley Marsh between 1987 and 2013. Changes in the boxed area are visible in the next image. These views provide evidence of some depositional processes occurring in the east part of the marsh. With the Phase 1 workshop completed and reported, Phase 2 will get underway this summer and includes selection of a permanent steering committee to manage the project, consolidation of Phase 1 science and a literature search, developing an overall governance mechanism, conducting a pilot field study, and selecting a feasible remediation strategy. Phase 3 implementation will depend on successful funding application in 2016. The pilot field study this summer will generate data on Red River flow through Netley Cut, water levels in the marsh, phosphorus sequestration in the marsh, and sedimentation rates in the marsh. All of this information will help us define a restoration strategy. That's a brief recap of some efforts by non-profit organizations to recuperate wetlands in Canada. Thanks for your attention. Please contact me at the Lake Winnipeg Foundation if you require any further information.